So I'd like to change topics one more time and talk about indie development on PlayStation 4. And before I get into the details, it's probably best to explain what we think of as an indie game. It's as much defined from what indie isn't as what it is. Indie isn't big-budget AAA titles created with 100 internal staff plus outsourcing. To us, it's smaller, nimbler titles, whatever they might be. These could be free-form, emotive experiences like Flower, but they could also be free-to-play first-person shooters like Zombie Studios' Blacklight Retribution. It's all about what the game developer wants to create and then finding a way to assist them to make it and help find its audience. So if we go back to the first PlayStation, there was no way to make an indie title. The hardware did not support digital downloads, and there was nowhere to store a game locally. All games were distributed on CD-ROMs. We did have an inexpensive dev kit called Net Yarose that allowed hobbyists to create their own games, but there was no way for these creators to directly reach their audience. The games typically ended up being included in a free CD-ROM in the official PlayStation magazine. At the same time, though, AAA game development was very different from what it is today. Team sizes were quite small. For example, Crash Bandicoot, a title that sold 6 million units, was created by just 7 people. And there was truly minimal specialization at that time, which meant a typical individual would contribute broadly in the creation of the game. For example, there were no dedicated game designers on that first Crash game. The background artists would freehand the levels into the modeling software. And I remember Jason Rubin coming to me with what he thought was a crazy idea at the time, that there be an artist on the project who did nothing but create textures. More importantly, though, due to the very small team sizes, the barriers to creating new types of experiences were quite low, and consequently, the diversity of games available at retail was quite high. As a result, there was a certain fun factor that was an intrinsic part of the PlayStation DNA in those years. Concept-driven titles like Parappa the Rapper, Devil Dice, or Intelligent Cube were very well received by the game-playing audience, and each went on to sell over 1 million units. When PlayStation 2 was released, the hardware became powerful enough to support much more realistic worlds, which meant a correspondingly greater emphasis on the assets that would be needed within the game. The result was roughly a tripling in team size, and even a conceptually driven title such as Katamari Damacy now needed a much larger team due to its reliance on background art, character models, and the like. There was an accompanying increase in specialization. Very focused roles such as combat designer or character rigger became quite common during this time. And of course, we've seen these trends accelerate in the PlayStation 3 generation. The photorealistic game of today might take hundreds of professionals to create, and the typical team member tends to have quite a specific role, such as lighting design or work having to do with some technical aspect of motion capture. These larger titles have, of course, been very appealing to the game-playing audience. Heavy content, such as Skyrim or Assassin's Creed, increasingly dominates the sales charts. At the same time, many developers are looking for a more intimate relationship with the game being created, and players are looking for lighter and more diverse, but equally compelling game experiences that will balance out these larger titles. Consequently, each year that goes by, there are more small teams following their indie dreams. Some are seeking to make a deeper and broader individual contribution than they had on AAA titles. For others, the lure is the complete freedom to set their own direction or the possibility of owning and controlling their own IP. Thanks to the hard drive and internet connection in PlayStation 3, digital delivery of content has, of course, become possible. And from the early days of the console lifecycle, we've been working both to directly create these unique experiences at the worldwide studio and also to foster the development elsewhere. We feel it is essential to bring these games to our platforms because we know that variety of experience is a key part of the appeal of PlayStation. In 2006, though, at the time of the launch of PlayStation 3, there were a number of obstacles to the full integration of smaller content. One issue that we encountered was with process and infrastructure. Over the course of 3 home consoles, Sony Computer Entertainment created an organization optimized to support the publishing of large titles. And the publishers likewise created organizations focused on building that bigger content. That meant that the systems in place at SCE in those early PS3 days for concept approval, format QA, or the like were designed with the timeframes and costs of AAA content in mind. Another issue that we encountered arose from the exotic technology in the PlayStation 3. In some cases, this became an inspiration to indie developers. Flower and Pixel Junk Shooter were in many ways born out of the question of how SPUs can be used to create distinctive visuals and unique gameplay. But more often than not, the architecture of the hardware in the early days of the PlayStation 3 hampered indie development on the platform. We've therefore worked hard to make PlayStation platforms a more welcoming place for indie titles. Part of our approach has been streamlining our processes. Part has been technology initiatives such as Fire Engine that make game development easier on the platforms. And part has been discoverability to ensure that gamers can easily search and find these titles in the PlayStation Store. And the result has been a broad array of first and third-party titles. And the console audience has woken up to the potential of indie games. Last year's Walking Dead won a stunning number of awards, and that game company's Journey was widely regarded as Game of the Year. Now, with the release of PlayStation 4, we understand that we have an opportunity to fundamentally alter the landscape of gaming. On the technology side, the supercharged PC architecture of the platform has made it both easier to bring indie titles to PlayStation 4 and easier to develop original titles directly on the platform. Even if the games use simpler graphics engines, the increased system memory means that it is trivial to support larger animation sets or more detailed virtual worlds. On PlayStation 4, I believe the indie paradigm will have the hardware as enabler, not as the central player, which is to say that Octodad isn't about the triangle count, it's about keeping your cephalopod in nature a secret from your human family. On the business side, we've had a bit of an epiphany. Since Adam Boyes joined SCE, pretty much the whole process has been overturned. He wanted us to look at the day in the life of an indie developer and challenged us to explain whether our processes were helping or hindering the creation of the diverse titles that we were looking for. And we ended up radically simplifying concept approval. We fully support self-publishing across all platforms, so it's now possible for developers to maintain complete creative and financial control. We now pretty much support any business model, whether it be buy-to-play, free-to-play, episodic, or microtransactions. And we're doing what we can to support indie development financially as well, whether that be through loaner dev kits or our incubation program or direct support from the Pub Fund. We also understand that accessibility is paramount, so we've gone from putting our process out front to putting people out front, which is to say that your indie journey on PlayStation 4 as a developer begins by tweeting Shahid Ahmad, not by filling out a form. A number of aspects of the PlayStation 4 user interface also foster growth of the indie sector. The share button allows the games community to easily elevate the visibility of game experiences that they find compelling. And we've brought heightened immediacy to digital distribution on PlayStation 4. The process of purchasing titles has been radically simplified, and once purchased, not only do games download in the background, but thanks to our new network infrastructure, it is possible to play the games even as they are being downloaded. So as a result of these technical, business, and platform factors, we believe that a renaissance of gaming is coming on PlayStation 4. Heavy content will thrive on the platform, but in many ways, we will also be returning to the creative freedom and broad content that made the early years of PlayStation so unforgettable. And it was a thrill, personally, to be able to present indie games side by side with AAA titles. At first, the New York Announce event, and then more spectacularly at E3, where the title count of playable indie games that we showed rivaled that of big budget titles. And it wasn't just title count, these were remarkable titles as well. Transistor was honored as the best downloadable game at E3 by the Game Critics Awards. As Adam Boyes says, we want to provide gamers with an endless variety of beautiful, challenging, and fantastic experiences, and the passion of small teams will be critical in transforming that goal into reality. So that is the story behind the development of PlayStation 4, my feelings on what the future will bring for gaming on the platform. And I would like to leave you with a few final thoughts. The first is that if you want to know what I'll be doing in 5 years' time, don't ask me, I don't know, ask Shuhei Yoshida. It's all part of his master plan. The reason there's a game developer deep inside the hardware team is that Shu had the patience and foresight to make it happen. And finally, the three musketeers are back. Andrew House was appointed president of SCE in 2011. And one of the small results of that, but huge for me, is that it provided a further boost to the policies of engagement with game developers around the world. I have a great friend who lives in Kyoto, in the eastern part of Japan. He runs a developer there, and he's worked with both Sony Computer Entertainment and Nintendo over the years. He says that what he respects the most about Nintendo is the incredible continuity that they have in the form of a core group of individuals that has now worked together for over 30 years. Well, we on the PlayStation side of the business only have about 20 years together now, but I'm really looking forward to the next decade or two with Shu, Andy, and the other amazing talents at Sony Computer Entertainment. And I think by the end of it, we'll even have my friend in Kyoto telling everyone how our values, held strongly over a great period of time, had such an influence over the world of games. And that is the talk. Thank you very much for your time today.